Zoom, of course, because the growing pandemic COVID-19 figures, they're going up, the death toll is going up, the vaccination drive is underway, and Newsfirst is also doing its part to ensure that the virus doesn't spread too much. Now then, this evening, our guest, having suffered from a bout of the dreaded COVID-19, I'm told, is that veteran politician, vociferous and everything else, Mr. Vasudeva Nanayakkara. Very good evening to you, Mr. Vasudeva.
Good evening, Faraz.
Are you fully recovered now, Mr. Vasu?
Well, I would say I'm 90% recovered.
And how was the experience?
Very bad, very bad. The period I spent after being found positive, 15 days, was no problem. It was only difficulty in eating and reduction in energy, which gradually developed. Thereafter, I had this lung problem. Thereafter, I had a heart condition. All these are connected with the COVID. But the duration was about 1 month to 2 months when all this happened. And now I am about 90% recovered.
Very good. And you, more than anyone else then, will be very keen on passing on the message to the public that they must listen to what the health advisories are, mainly using the mask, cleanliness and social distancing. But what do you say to people who are doubting having the vaccine taken? Would you ask them to take it, or would you ask them not to take it?
I would ask them to take it in the absence of anything else. If there is nothing else but the vaccination, take the vaccination, whether it is fully proved or not.
Okay. Now then, this government, fortunately or otherwise, has been in power since the start of the pandemic, and therefore the delays in getting the vaccine and any delays, anything, all will lay at the doorstep of your government. So I want to ask you, along with the delays and the availability, bringing the other drugs in and so on and so forth, are you now of the same view that there is a problem and that we need to address the problem, rather than the initial stage that the government's viewpoint was that this wasn't very, it wasn't very big, anything very big, really?
The government did not delay. It waited for WHO recommendations. The moment WHO recommendations came out, we have gone out to purchase the vaccinations. And we have purchased from sources where it is available. Vaccinations which we first used later were found not to be available. Stockpiling of those vaccinations by the rich countries had deprived the poor countries. This is news in the world, where the not so rich countries and the poor countries are deprived of the vaccination because of the stockpiling by the rich countries. Well, leave it apart. We have now found Sinopharm, and Sinopharm has come in such quantities, and also it has awakened other countries, rich countries, to give us some part of the other vaccinations, has helped us to, I think, get the amount that we really require.
All right. Can I take you to this whole issue of the indigenous medicine, Ayurvedic medicine? Now then, we had the infamous Pani, Dhammika's Pani. We had ministers who were chucking out clay pots over the bridges of rivers. Now with all this, are you a firm believer that Ayurvedic medicine can contribute positively to controlling the spread of COVID-19?
We have found that the experiment carried out by the governor in Ratnapura, Sabaragamuwa, to have a combination of the Western medicine and the Ayurvedic medicine, and doctors on both sides to come together and treat the patients has helped the patients in a big way. This is the experiment that has been found successful, and we salute the governor for this. He took the initiative and brought both doctors from both sides and found the Ayurvedic premises for this purpose. And later the people wanted to go more to the Ayurvedic section than be in the Western medicine part of the hospital. Having found the effectiveness of it, has decided at the last cabinet that we will have the entire population given the Ayurvedic medications which help them to develop immunity. Developing immunity is what you do with the vaccine too.
Whilst I hear what you say, this governor, does he have any medical background to it? Is this medically supported?
No, he has no medical background, but he has a social background right through, which helps him to understand from all the information that the two branches of medicine can together contribute a lot in order to find the results, like in China.
What about your own experience? How were you treated? Were you treated with Western medicine or with Ayurvedic medicine?
I was not treated with any medicine. I was just allowed to be.
So you didn't take paracetamols or anything like that?
No, not during the COVID time, but later on when I developed the chest problems, the lung problems, and the heart conditions, then it was all the way the Western treatment.
And where were you treated?
I was treated in the General Hospital of Colombo.
That means the National Hospital?
Yes.
And how did you find the treatment?
Very good, very effective, and very cordial services by the staff. Maybe weak because of me.
Well, what about the equipment? Were you happy that the equipment was up to date?
Yes, all the equipment required was available.
And much of this has been, quite a number has been donated by the private sector. Do you feel good that there are fellow Sri Lankans who can afford it and who have also made these contributions?
Yes, they are donating part of their earnings and profits, which is a very good gesture. But I think all those entities could do much more than that.
Well, I suppose they could have if your government didn't give them so much of tax breaks. You didn't hesitate to give them a tax break.
This government, as soon as it came into power, removed so many taxes and helped them to get them into their profit territory. As you know, the tax base was changed and the tax limits were changed, and this gave the high taxpayers a rich dividend. And later the VAT was reduced to 50% of it, and which helped them to again stock their profits with the reductions without passing them down to the consumers.
And can I ask you, what about the children in the Ratnapura district? In terms of their education, have they got enough of data signals? Is the signal strong? Have they got enough devices to connect? And are there enough teachers who are able to connect and teach your constituents, basically, in your area?
Large numbers, I cannot tell you whether it is majority or not, but large numbers do not have accessibility to the online systems, and they have to learn the online system firstly. Secondly, they have to have the equipment. Thirdly, they have to have the signals. All these were lacking in areas that I went around.
And what do you hope, as the Member of Parliament for that area, what do you hope to do about it?
The government has taken the decision to set up the towers required in the different parts of the district in order to have the signals available.
Are you going to force the networks to up their signal, or are you going to allow them to act according to market forces, and where there is no demand, they won't put the signal, the signal boosters, for example?
The government has got them around to agree to this proposal of the government to have the signal availability by erecting the towers, and the companies are prepared to cooperate, and with the cooperation particularly of SLT Mobitel, we will have the majority of them.
And Mr. Vasudeva, as a politician, what do you say when I remind you that 85% of Sri Lanka's revenue goes towards paying for the public service and 15% for everything else? What do you say when I say to you that the education system in Sri Lanka, especially when the state universities, quite often you find that the private sector doesn't really, they look askance when somebody is coming to them for a job from a state university. What do you say to that? Because in the end, about 15,000, 50% of those graduates are then absorbed by the government machinery, boosting the numbers of the civil service yet again, and we really can't afford to. So what do you want to do about that kind of education system? Do you want to increase it?
You have bundled several questions into one. First question is, should the government spend on the public service? I say yes, but the government at the same time must increase in income. It is the lack of income that is made to feel the pinch of the expenditure. So therefore it is a question of increasing our income through the state-owned enterprises, which are giving a return, very low return. They must be made to bring a very high return. And we must find out the avenues of income. And these will help us in order to increase the required income of our state, which is committed to a social democratic framework of expenditure. Then secondly, whether the students who come out of these universities, whether they are eligible, they are very much eligible. All that is required is the English to be learned by them and the English to be spoken by them. If that was in place, I don't think there is a problem. So there is that failure on the part of all governments in not having educated the children in English also from the very lower standards. So at least now, if we take the lesson and teach them from the lower standards, then I believe there will be no distinction between graduates and graduates qualified elsewhere.
On that note, we'll take a quick peek at this evening's headlines from Newsfirst's Primetime News. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
Welcome back to Newsline Zoom. Our guest today, Mr. Vasudeva Nanayakkara, politician like quite no other. Now then, Mr. Vasudeva, can I ask you, do you feel that Sri Lanka is on its way rolling towards a militarization?
Certainly not. Certainly not. We are making use of the retired military officers to do a job which is very much being done well when they are put into such places. But there are instances when such officers have also failed. So we are learning it. But the important thing is that military officers who are retired can be useful in conducting our affairs as best as we can, because the military officers have got used to set of disciplines that they have to carry out tasks. So the tasks which are assigned to them will have to be carried out, but of course this time did not by commanding but by cooperation with others who work in their particular entities.
And this the reason I'm asking you this question is that today the President appointed yet another military man, and this time round as the Commissioner General of Essential Services. Yesterday this appointment was done. So when we look at it from a world perspective, and where there is international concern that in between all these reconciliation efforts and so on, that the government of Sri Lanka, this government of Sri Lanka, is going towards a militarization. Doesn't it not send the wrong kind of optics, or are you all not worried about the optics?
Well, these are experiments which we must dare to practice without being pushed back by opinions in the international scene. If these military officers who are retired can be useful and that they can be well up to the task that is before them, and they have learned how to work with the people, with the employees, like how our President has learned to work with the Cabinet and the members of Parliament, I think we are on the right path.
And are you suggesting to me that the President and the relationship with his Cabinet of Ministers is excellent? Are there no issues now? Everything going along hunky-dory?
Well, there is always a disparity and a contest between the members of Parliament who become members of the Cabinet, and on the other side, the presidential power, which is outside the Parliament. So the presidential power, which is outside the Parliament, and the members of the Parliament who become members of Cabinet have to get along with the Cabinet, with the President, and the President has to get along with the Parliament. So this, give and take between the President and the members of the Parliament, of the Cabinet, is going on reasonably well.
Is it more take on the part of the President's side, or is it more give?
Well, with the presidential system in place in our Constitution, he will naturally be on top than the others who are around him. So therefore, there is unavoidable supremacy which has to come round to get used to the democratic practices.
How is our national treasure, Mahinda Rajapaksa, doing? Is he taking this sidelining, is almost forced retirement or towards the path of retirement? Is he taking it well?
No, he is not in even partial retirement. He is very much in the scene of being the Prime Minister and the leader in the Parliament. All problems that arise between the Parliament and the Executive are resolved by the Prime Minister.
Don't you feel sorry for him? Don't you feel that this chap he's done so much for the country that he ought to be allowed to retire gracefully and to be with his grandchildren and his wife?
I think he is quite well enough to deliver to the people the maximum he can, within the constraints he is placed in. When I say constraints, his age, like mine, physical abilities, within those constraints, what he can deliver to the people, he gladly wishes to do so. And he has no rest until he is in service to the public.
Do you think that he'll ever, I'm sorry that this program's becoming all about MR, but do you think he'll ever retire?
I doubt. There is no retirement for a patriotic politician.
Will you retire?
No, I will work on the political scene as long as I can, and I believe that is the purpose of life.
And do you firmly believe, Mr. Vasudeva Nanayakkara, that this government is doing everything possible for and on behalf pro the Republic of Sri Lanka, not for their supporters or anything like that, for the people? Do you firmly believe that?
I firmly believe that the government is committed and is carrying out its work for the benefit of the entire population in the most difficult of circumstances.
What do you say about the lockdown? Do you want an enforceable lockdown, or are you happy with the way it is now, which is not really enforced?
We think the lockdown will give results to reduce the numbers of infections and numbers of deaths, and the lockdowns will help to minimize the coming together of people in the public scene. I believe lockdown at the same time has a very hard blow on the day-to-day livelihood earners, about which we have to look after. That is that aspect of it. On the other hand, the medical grounds require the lockdown to be put in place.
And can I ask you, Mr. Vasu, because you are such a fiery and independent politician, and you have done so many things on behalf of the people, like going even for public interest litigation and so on, do you believe that this government is being fair and responsible in not really enforcing this current lockdown?
Well, as far as the government is concerned, we have carried out lockdowns from time to time, and there has been a debate between the medical profession and the government about the need of lockdowns and the need of the economy. So we ultimately end up somewhere in a compromise. We need the economy to run, we need the lockdown to help the people to reduce the number of deaths and number of infections. So it is not a question of one answer, but more than one answer.
And the answer to the IMF, should we go to the IMF, yes or no?
IMF is our guillotine.
So I take it your answer is no to the IMF.
Who will go to guillotine?
So I take it that your answer is no to the IMF.
More than saying no. I know what the IMF is. IMF is privatization, IMF is austerity, IMF is many other things which are against the interest of the larger public. Well, I think Dr. Lakshman put it best, the governor of the central bank, that we want not the few to benefit, but all to have justice and equity. And which means that the IMF is anathema.
Vasudeva Nanayakkara, you put it ever so beautifully, as you always do. Thank you very much for being on Newsline Zoom. And that's the way it was, ladies and gentlemen. Take care, have a great evening, and as always, God bless you.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.